Let's unbox the Black Series 6-inch figure of Tala Durith from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. One of my New Year's resolutions is to open up all of my Black Series 6-inch Star Wars figures rather than storing them away, where they sadly get a little bit forgotten about. I'm having so much fun going through and opening them all up and building a really fun loose Black Series display. I've been recently opening up the archive carded reissue figures. They look a lot of fun out of the box, but of course something that really needs to be opened up are the last few of my blind boxes here from the plastic-free packaging era that interrupted the main side angle line of Black Series packaging boxes. It was so sad to see that line interrupted. I love the side angle packages, but if you want to line them all up, it really does break the flow, and of course we just can't see the figure inside. So poor Tala Durith from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series has been in her box for far too long, and I haven't even laid eyes on her, so really wanting to get her out of the box. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get her out of the packaging finally so we can take a closer look. But first, let's take a quick look at the packaging. The change in style from the side angled window box to side angle plastic free packaging box unfortunately happened in the midst of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I have here an older figure of Obi-Wan and Tala just to show a few differences in the packaging style. The plastic window is obviously the biggest difference. It wraps around to the left hand side, not present on the plastic free packaging. We also had a plastic hanger at the top. We have a larger cardboard hanger here at the top as well. We also had a plastic window to let in a little bit of light into the plastic display. Obviously with no window we do not need that top one for light there as well. On the plastic free packaging version, instead of that side window, we have an image of the figure inside where we can see the Tala Durith figure and her one singular accessory, and because we can't see the scale of the figure we have the height here written instead, 5.7 inches or 14.6 centimeters, and a large graphic here showing that it is plastic free packaging. The rest of the design is pretty similar. Instead of the window we have a glossy image of the figure inside. As an Imperial Officer it's a little bit simpler. They can't get too adventurous with the pose, but I do like that glossy image. It just doesn't make up for the fact that we can't see the figure inside. For the Obi-Wan Kenobi series we have this lovely light blue accent color used for the title stripe across the front, which reads Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that accent color is also used for the character name Tala Durith, and because she is in her Imperial Officer outfit she's noted as being Imperial Officer in subtext there. Now of course this is still during the side angle box line, so we can see that we've got that lovely side art. If you are lining up your boxes they don't look too different. The proportions are all pretty much the same. It is mostly just those hangers at the top that give away that this one is a plastic free packaging. For Tala we have her putting on one of her gloves. She's not in action pose. We do have that accent color coming down there at the bottom, are really nice with the text for her nameplate there at the bottom. Moving on to the back, pretty much the same as the older style of boxes here. We've got the figure instead of character art. I do kind of wish that the backs lined up the same because we do have character art here on the side of the box. Would be nice to see it on the back, but they have chosen to use that glossy image from the front of the box showing the action figure rather than character art. We also have a blurb, but for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series the blurb is about the series rather than the character. It reads, Obi-Wan Kenobi is set years after the dramatic events of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, where Kenobi faced the corruption of his friend and Jedi apprentice Anakin Skywalker turned Sith Lord Darth Vader. And that is repeated in a few different languages. We can see both versions of the packaging style have that accent color stripe across the back with the number for this particular figure in the series. Tala is number 13 from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Both boxes have the same copyright barcode text there on the lower half, and again we have the figure there on the side instead of that window wrapping round to the side, though we do still have the color stripe connecting the front and backs of the boxes. As you can see, the box for my Tala Durith has a lot of shopware and a clearance sticker that refuses to come off. This one got dinged up pretty quickly, and to be honest I can still find Tala Durith on store shelves here even though she is a much older figure. That does seem to be the unfortunate fate for a lot of Imperial Officer characters, despite the fact that they are so central to Star Wars. In fact, other characters characters like Deirdre Mero, who have not yet been released in Black Series or indeed in the 3.75-inch line either, you really do notice when they are not made. So I was really excited to see Tala Durith in the lineup of Black Series figures for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. She is an important character, even though perhaps she's not the most action orientated in terms of her outfit here, like the likes of Obi-Wan with the lightsaber. She's important. I'm glad to see her in the line, though of course she's just not as fun to see on the store shelf because we don't have a window. So she's been trapped in this poor beat up box for far too long. Let's go ahead and open her up. I've just quickly cut through the tape on the underside of the box, so let's go ahead and open it up. Of course, we've got that little information sheet there. Let's go ahead and pull out the tray. So it's always kind of fun seeing how these plastic-free packaging figures are packaged up. We've got a cardboard tray with these sort of cut-out slats here to hold up the figures, and they're generally just kind of a bit mummified in Black Series branded tissue paper. This one looks like she's tucked in there pretty well, so I might need to cut some cardboard to get it out. And we have a little paper envelope containing her one blaster pistol accessory. So I'm just going to quickly grab some scissors and see if I can cut through this little strap here so we can get her out. And hopefully, there we go. Okay, so let's open her up. They do end up in slightly odd positions. They're not posed in the clear plastic trays that usually figures are in, so they generally look a little wonky. Okay, so yeah, she would not look like that if she was in a clear plastic tray. Her legs are all a little bit bent, her head's tipped off to one side, so we'll do just a little bit of quick straightening up. So yes, so one of the things that I really didn't like about the plastic-free packaging era was the inability to see the figure before you were buying it, you know, in terms of any flaws, damage, paintwork that was a bit, you know, a bit sloppy. But as a quick little look, she looks okay. Nothing looks broken here. Of course, we'll go through everything shortly. Just sort of want to do that sort of first in-hand look. So she's looking really fun, a little bit different to other Imperial Officer characters, of course, that we see from the original trilogy. This is going to be quite fun, I think. There's some really nice details here. So let's open up here a blaster pistol accessory from the little paper envelope here as well. We've got a little perforating section here that we can just rip across. So just the one blaster pistol accessory for her. Nice and tidy. Good to see that that's not missing. That's always a concern there as well. Okay, so now we've got everything open. Let's clear away the packaging and take a closer look at Tala. So now with all of that packaging cleared away, I now have Tala and her blaster pistol accessory out of the packaging. So took a few moments just to straighten out her legs so she is standing upright and she stands up nice. The Imperial Officer boots have nice flat soles, so they do tend to stand up quite nicely. While she's standing here, let's just go and quickly check her height. She is listed on the box as being just under 6 inches, which you can see there on the ruler, under 6 inches. And here is the centimeter ruling, just under 15 centimeters, again matching up pretty well to what is depicted on the box. So another quick note, when I was taking her out of the packaging, I could see something catching my eye. Wasn't sure if it's just the light on the plastic of her tunic here, but there was a very tiny little silver smudge just on the chest, but a good sort of a rub with the sort of thumb pad of my finger and it came away. So quite the relief there. I was worried that I'd had her in her box all of this time only to find out that she had a paint flaw. So it wasn't like a big splodge of paint. It was just a sort of a little bit of a residue there that came off. So big relief there. So let's go over her paint details and sculpting. So of course we know the Imperial Officer sort of costume by now. It dates back all the way to A New Hope in 1977. So it's pretty standardized, but of course in the original trilogy we don't see too many female officers serving in the Empire. Of course Tala, as we know from Obi-Wan Kenobi, she's not really serving the Empire. She's a bit of a double agent there, working for the underground sort of rebellion, but I do love seeing this Imperial Officer costume on a female. I do have an Imperial Officer costume myself that I made many years ago, so even though they're not the most action characters, I am particularly fond of them because I have made this costume. So it's fun to see a woman wearing this outfit. So something I thought was kind of interesting was that on some characters the Imperial cap can be removed. Now, it wasn't depicted as a separate accessory on the box, and it was a little bit hard to tell because we didn't have a window, but now that she's out of the box, you can see that this hat does not come off. The hair that is just coming out the back of her hat is sculpted as part of her face, as this is all one piece. Then the hat is sculpted as a separate piece, but it is attached. I can't remove it. There is no hair underneath there from what I can tell looking at it. It's nice and tight. I've got a really nice seam line there where those two pieces come together, but I thought that that was interesting because it's not always the case. I guess she's just got a little bit longer hair compared to some other characters there. Tiny little white dot here on the back of her hair, but it's all the way in the back. I'm not really going to notice that. But yeah, I like the way it is positioned on here. It looks good. It's not hiding her face, and it's just nice to see that it's on there nice and straight. That would really bother me. Sometimes you do find hair that's just a little bit misaligned, a little bit set back, so you get those sort of joins. But of course, the sort of peak on this hat does a pretty good job of hiding that join. Just really nice and tight. Sometimes I like accessories you can sort of take on and off, but sometimes they just look very rubbery and sort of a bit big to fit over here. We tend to get that sometimes with the helmeted characters. If the helmets fit on over a sculpted head, they end up being too large. So I really like the way that they did it for this one, which is kind of fun. So of course, gray tunic. I like the sculpting here. We've got a really subtle fabric texture on the plastic here. It does not this is like just a little bit different in terms of the gloss. You can kind of see down here, it just looks a little bit more of a matte finish to the gloss up here, because we do have, as of course, two different plastics. This is the hard plastic, which tends to show sort of sharper detail just a little bit better. So the texture is a little bit more visible on the chest, the upper torso. Down here, it's a little smoother. It is there, but it's very, very subtle. So of course, we've got the rubbery plastic, and we can see if I just move her arm that we have a split here on this side and also on this side, because of course the tunics tend to come down, cover the hip articulation areas. So we've got this sort of rubbery lower section so we can still move the legs, and I will test out the articulation shortly. I do like the fact that the holster here is doing a really good job of hiding that. I almost didn't see that at first because it's so nicely hidden behind the holster there, and just the actual placement it sits almost completely closed, which is a little unusual. When we come to this side, you can see that that is not sitting closed. I'm not flexing the legs or anything like that, but it just kind of sits a little bit more open. With everything being sort of this mid-gray, it does kind of blend in there because we've got the little bit of shading, sort of shadowing here with the sculpting of the tunic section here in the front. So it kind of blends in a little bit with all of that. I like the fact that we've got, you know, a little bit of flexibility. Not that she's going to be doing acrobatic kicks like a Jedi, but we want to sort of do some posing because of course this is an action figure. It's got articulation. We don't want the sculpting to completely immobilize the legs on these figures. So moving on, of course, we've got that little sort of stacked disc design on the Imperial Officer cap, which is nice. We've got the little sort of stitched lines on the little peak there of the hat. Got some really nice detail there. Her tunic, we've got a seam down the front, kind of drawing it together. We've got a nice high collar, just a tiny little bit of paint from the, I like it. I don't mind it so much if the paint for fabric components doesn't quite cover everything. I would prefer it to have just a little bit of skin tone showing just on there. It's really, really small, than having, say, collar paint splash up the neck. That bothers me. I find it less distracting to have just a slightly less coverage. And if I tip the head around, I'm jumping forward a little bit to articulation, you can see the collar on the tunic is attached to the neck, so I can actually move that collar around a little bit, which is going to be a little bit tricky because, of course, there is a seam line on the front of the collar and down just the front of the tunic to kind of tuck it in. So we don't really want to be twisting that around too much. So I'm going to try and keep her neck still because I like it when the seams all line up. So of course we have her rank badge here, an icon of the Imperial outfits here. We've got the silver rank badge with 3 red rectangles, 1 blue one. The painting on this is pretty good. It really bothers me when these don't look like rectangles. It's such a distinctive sort of eye-catching part of the tunic, but this looks really nice. We've got a nice, real sort of bright, vibrant metallic silver paint there and those tiny squares. That looks pretty well aligned with the sculpting. And we have a single silver code cylinder on each side there, one on the left, one on the right, moving it down to the iconic belt that all the Imperials that wear the tunic outfits wear. Okay, so we've got the black sort of supposed to be leather. There is a really subtle sort of leather-like texture to the sculpting on the belt. You can see that in the back. And we have sort of the grooves at the top and the bottom of the leather belt here. Then we have the belt buckle in the front with the same matching stacked disc design, which appears on the caps there as well, and a single silver stud to the left-hand side of the belt buckle. And of course, we also have that holster there. It technically is, let's have a look, fully sealed at the bottom. Sometimes these ones have gaps at the bottom, so they're a little bit squishy. That one is fully closed at the bottom, but you can see how wide that is around the top. So hopefully her blaster pistol accessory is going to fit in there quite nicely. Overall, nice sculpting on the tunic. We can see, if I move her arms back around, the sculpting lines sort of showing that sort of overlapping front panel on the front of the tunic here. And of course, because they're based off older military uniforms, we've got very formal sort of jacket construction seam lines here. We've got a seam sort of running down kind of towards the inside of the arm on both sides. We can see the seam line there, and it follows through. If I put her arm, it will follow from the top down to the bottom. It ends nicely where she's got black gloves on, and there's also a second seam line down the sleeves. You can see that running down the back, which kind of matches up with the back seams which curve into the shoulders. So we've got this sort of nice flow of the seam lines there, looking really nice. So of course it's going to get a little bit distorted once we start playing with the articulation. These lines won't line up completely, but it's mostly in the back. But yeah, really nice. I think it's just the fact that this is just a little bit glossier with that really nice sort of fabric texture coming through. This one is just a little less glossy, and I can't make out the fabric texture. It looks a little smoother and just sort of softer, but I'm looking really close up. Moving on down, the thighs are made out of hard plastic, but they don't have quite the same, it's got a bit of a fabric texture sculpted into it, but not quite as visible as on the chest here. And of course, following on from that same military style, we've got sort of the riding pant style here for her pants, the sort of jodhpur style where they flare out over the thighs. And of course, the sort of tucking in, all of that fabric tucking in into her tall imperial boots. We get this sort of nice gathering, which does a pretty good job of hiding the articulation here at the knees. So you can see we've got a little bit of the pant just above the boots, and the articulation's just kind of cutting here at the knees. Slightly more modern Black Series figure, so we don't have those two peg articulation styles that really do cut in. If you've seen any of the other Imperial Officer characters that have the older two peg style, it makes this really big hole because this is just so extended out to the side. You get a really deep peg hole cutting through the sculpting, and I really don't like that. So really happy to see that she has the newer articulation style on her legs. It's a little bit hard to see those sorts of details from the side on the photos of the figure on the box, so really nice to see there. Now looking at her shiny gloss sort of a riding boot style knee-high boots here, they don't have any kind of fixtures or details to it, but it does have a nice sort of slightly crinkled leather texture, a little bit of a seam up the back, of course, but I like that sort of slightly sort of leather crinkled texture to the sculpting there. Looks really nice. No buckles or straps or anything like that. Some Imperial characters have a little bit of a cross little strap just here at the back, sort of closure, but this one does not. So yeah, nice. Very grey, but of course if we line her up with stormtroopers and that, she's going to look fantastic. I like the fact that she's got black gloves. She does have a holster and a blaster pistol, which of course not many Imperials that we see in the original trilogy. They don't tend to carry weapons on the Death Star. They're generally sort of just without accessories. So at least she does have a weapon, but overall, I'm really happy with the sculpting and the detail. Thankfully, there's no major paint flaws here. There isn't like a big splodge on her belt buckle. her rank badge is really nice and tidy, again with the code cylinders, that detail on the hat. Again, it's pretty sort of plain in terms of the actual painting, because of most of this would probably be made in both the black and the grey plastics, rather than, so we're only talking about very small painted details. And of course, because I couldn't see her in the box, I do like the face sculpt of this character. I think she's really nice. She's got sort of a slightly neutral, not too stern sort of an expression there, with the nice modern sort of digital printing for her eyebrows, eyes, and just a little touch of color on the lips as well. Really nice. The hair is painted pretty well. It follows the ears pretty well, not perfectly. There is just a little bit where it's not quite following the paint, so it's giving this ear a little bit more of sort of a Vulcan point, just slightly there on that side, and a little bit here as well, where the paint for the hair hasn't completely covered all the way around the ear, and pretty well good there. In the back, we've just got that one tiny little dot of something that's just caught there in the back of her hair. But overall, I think her face is good. She looks modern. She doesn't have that sort of older paint app for her eyes that always kind of catches your attention in not the best way. And yeah, I know she's an Imperial character. It's not too surprising, but of course, because I couldn't see her through the box, it's just really nice to see that she looks as good as I hoped from that sort of promotional photography on the box front there. She looks good. So let's test out her articulation. As I was showing a little bit, when I'm moving her neck, I can feel that collar section is starting to move. You can see I can sort of get that line there misaligned. So that neck section can move, but I'm generally going to be keeping that pretty straight. And I'm going to be turning her head. It does want to move the neck a little bit. So if I hold the neck in place, she turns side to side pretty well. If I tip her head back, it wants to pull the neck. You can see that I'm sort of pulling that sculpted collar quite out, and I'm actually creating a little bit of a gap there. Not my favorite look, so I'm probably going to keep her head in a little bit more of a neutral and not sort of tipping her back, or she can kind of go forward a little bit. Not too bad. Personally, I think she looks just a little bit better facing forward, but about as much, because of course she doesn't have long hair or like a helmet or anything, just that little bit of sort of the hair at the back, just sort of just catching on the collar is the only restriction to movement there. So tunics for the Imperials, they do have a little bit, just a little bit of sort of a cap on the shoulders, but hopefully because we don't have any kind of sculpted detail on the sleeves, this isn't going to affect our articulation too much. Let's get her arms out. Nice and straight, easy to move. Her arms, now that I sort of pulled them out, are quite thin here. There's not a lot of bulk to the bottom of the arms. They're kind of a little bit flat and pinched in. But when I put them down by her side, she does get them quite nipped into her body, which is nice. This one's sitting out just a little bit because of the holster there. You kind of got to put her arms straight down, kind of a little bit behind or a little bit in front to get them to go straight down. But I do like characters that can put their arms straight down by their sides. It just looks awkward when they're sort of always hanging out. And she's actually got a pretty nice tight V shape when I put her arms straight up. Some characters end up kind of being a little bit out here. But yeah, that sort of tight, thin sleeve section there means I can get them up quite high. Let's test out the elbows. Nice modern elbows. They're actually not too stiff. Sometimes with the figures that have been in their box for a while, they're quite stiff to articulate, but she is fine. I'm not fighting with those at all. So you can see I can get her hands quite close together, which is nice. Not that she's going to be sort of holding a lightsaber or anything like that, but I think just Imperials tend to do sort of standing posing. I know when it comes to some of the Imperials, you do the kind of Grand Admiral Thrawn type sort of thinking pose where you can sort of cross their hands behind them, and it just looks quite cool from the front. Again, getting her arms quite in close to the body, that looks quite fun. So you can see I'm pivoting her elbows quite easily without a restriction there. So we've got rotating wrists here as usual. Just taking a quick little look. Let's see, I think she might have side-to-side rockers. It's very tight in here because of the length of the sleeves. Of course, these are kind of more styled like jacket cuffs rather than shirt cuffs, so it comes down quite close to the wrists there. And it's very, very tight, the rocking side to side there. She's not going to be doing too many sort of weapon posing there. Now this one is front and back, so we can get her hand just a little bit further down like that. Again, that sleeve is just kind of restricting the movement there a little bit, but she doesn't have a complicated accessory to hold, so I understand that is just going to be part of just the sleeve design there. We're not going to have too much else. So she does actually have a slightly different sort of torso articulation. A lot of the modern figures have a little bit of a higher articulation point, kind of in line with Stormtrooper or Clone Trooper armor, kind of hits a little bit more sort of mid-chest. But of course, the belt on an Imperial Officer tunic is the perfect spot to hide articulation. So I did a little bit of a tweak here when I was trying to get her to stand up out of the box, and my figure is particularly tight. She's kind of creaking. It's kind of giving me a little bit of resistance. I do get there eventually, and she doesn't snap back, but you can kind of see the level of resistance. I'm not able to turn her side to side very easily. Now, because I tend to focus a little bit more on the detail on my figures rather than the articulation, I do prefer it when the seam lines of these costumes line up. When you start to turn her to the side, it just starts to look a little bit awkward. Things start not lining up, but she can move. Indeed, the sculpting of the tunic under the arms even kind of works. If you twist it to the side, it kind of looks like it's pulling a little bit there, because normally that's just kind of tucked in there. But yeah, so she does turn around. It's a little bit stiff. At least she doesn't snap back into center like some figures do. The tricky part on figures like this is going to be at the hips. So surprisingly, I'm actually it's kind of nice how easily I can lift this up. Normally when the holster is attached to the lower section of the tunic, it adds so much more thickness to the rubber and makes this part very hard to move. But I'm actually able to flex this quite easily, which I was not expecting. Same can be said for this. You can kind of see the thickness of the plastic there with the cross section. This side has a little bit of that sort of circular curve to the top of the split here, not quite as prominent on this side. So I am going to be careful about how much I'm going to flick this, because I don't want to create a split at the top. But pulling it up, you can see that we have got that swivel articulating a point there at the top of the thighs, which is nicely hidden just under the hemline of the tunic there. You can see the articulation style that we have here for the legs. I'm just going to sort of pull them out so you can see there underneath. The dark grey sometimes hides a bit of the detail, but she's got good articulation. Again, that slightly modern style at the knees. I was hoping that we had of the modern sort of good flexibility at the hips, so I can actually get her into almost a seated position, which is quite impressive considering how much of this tunic we have here in the front. So the flexibility is not really hampered by that section there. That's really nice to see. So I can do a lot of things. If she had, say, not that we see officers riding dewbacks, but if I had a Black Series dewback, I'm pretty sure she would probably ride that no problem. Just holding this up a little bit, you can see turning the thigh section there. The top of the pants is fairly smooth. Usually I don't utilize this particular articulating point because it cuts through detail on the pants, but the flaring of the pants doesn't really start until we get down below that line. There is a tiny little seam line here at the side that you can just sort of see if I line it up there, but it's just kind of hidden. So because it's all kind of underneath there, I can feel quite happy using that as an articulating point and not sort of cutting through the detail. And then of course we've got the knees here. So this particular figure is very swingy, if that's a word, at her knees in this particular direction. I found that possibly because of the way that she was packaged in the box, she kind of had her legs sort of twisted to a specific way. So very easy to swing the knees side to side. Let's check out how well she's going to sort of bend at the knees. There we go. Again, this knee's moving just a little bit easier than this one. And the articulating sort of section here is a slightly different color plastic to the exterior of her pants here. It's kind of a shiny finish, and it looks like just a slightly different color. But I'm probably not going to have that exposed at the front. You can see it there in the back. It's just a slightly different color. Not sure why. I'm not staring at the back of my figures on display very often, but I do like it when all of the sort of parts really match up. I'm never quite sure why on certain figures the articulating sort of sections or the pegs are slightly different colors. I never quite understand the logic behind that choice from Hasbro. For the ankles, we've got articulating sort of, that's about as far forward. We're hitting a lot there, getting a lot of resistance. I can get quite a good tip down there at the back, and she does roll her ankles side to side there as well. So that's pretty much expected. They've done quite a few of these sort of black riding boots. We see a lot of Star Wars characters wear them, so I'm pretty sure Hasbro's got that articulation down quite well. So she's actually got pretty good articulation, to be honest, in terms of the flexibility at the hips. I wasn't expecting to get her into that full seated position. Sometimes these tunic fronts just really limit what you can do in terms of the movement around the hips, but she's really fun and she stands up really well. Sometimes when I've been playing with the articulation, moving the legs every which way, they are quite a bit of a job to get them to balance again, but she stands up really nicely. She doesn't have a lot of bulk, she doesn't have a jetpack or anything like that to really throw her off. She stands really nicely, so it's going to be fun sort of finding just the right pose for her because she isn't quite actiony. But let's test out her blaster pistol because she does at least have a weapon to go with her. So just going to pop it down there in the back. So the one blaster pistol accessory, we've got quite a high scope on this one, but some nice details. It's not the most sort of sharpest detail that I see on Black Series weapons, but we've got a reasonable amount of detail there in terms of the surface. No paint work on this. It is cast from that sort of dark grey, slightly speckly plastic. There are tiny little metallic flecks in it, but it isn't painted with a metallic paint. Some accessories have got that bright, shiny metallic silver or a bit more of a darker gunmetal metallic. This one doesn't appear to be painted. It's just cast in this plastic. We've got an enclosed trigger guard there. So I can see that Tala does have an extended trigger finger, so that's hopefully going to work. There is just a little bit of flex here, but it's not a rubbery accessory. It's pretty rigid, I gotta say. I'm not able to flex it. I can't wobble it side to side, and this just has just the tiniest sort of little bit of flex to it. So I'm going to be careful because this is probably a little bit more prone to snapping than those ones that have a rubbery flex to it. But I'm not as fond of the rubbery ones. Sometimes they really do bend a little bit in the packaging. So let's test out how well Tala is going to hold her blaster pistol. The really rigid plastic ones are so much easier to get into the figure hands, and she holds that really nice. Her finger just goes straight into that trigger guard. Really nice. That looks really cool. So yeah, a little bit unusual to have an Imperial character with a blaster pistol. We don't see Tarkin wielding a weapon like this. So that's a lot of fun, and yeah, feels appropriate that they don't carry E11s, so sort of the longer classic Stormtrooper blaster pistol. I like the fact that they've got these sort of slightly shorter ones. Still feel Imperial. You can sort of see a bit of similarity in the base shape, but we've sort of got a longer scope in the shorter length there. So let's quickly test it out. I'm going to put the scope on the outside because that is how it's kind of depicted on the box art. I'm hoping this will fit in. It's quite snug because nothing extends out the bottom. There is no hole in the bottom there. But yeah, that generally looks pretty good. It fits in there well. I don't feel like that's going to come out. A little bit of a wriggle to sort of push it in there. And it's not a deep one. It's only coming in about halfway, but that looks pretty good. Of course, I can sort of rest her hand there. But I do think she looks pretty good with it in her hand, which is nice. Doesn't look sort of awkward. Sometimes there are figures that we don't generally think of holding accessories, but we do see Tala in action scenes, so I do like the fact that she has got a weapon there. So she looks really cool. I think this looks pretty natural. Some holsters, certainly in older figures, they look very boxy, very clunky, but I think that this is a pretty good sort of balance there for, you know, holding an accessory that she can hold as well, stowing it away. She looks really cool. So when I knew that I was going to be opening this one up, I just wanted to quickly grab some of my other Obi-Wan Kenobi series figures just to kind of see how she's going to look with some of the other characters. So this is one of the Obi-Wan ones that I have open up, and of course in a lot of scenes we see Tala with Ned B, and so of course he is a deluxe figure. He is much taller than the standard figures, so you can see see how much taller he is. I was curious to see how tall Tala is to Obi-Wan. She is very close in height. His hood is sort of hiding his true height there a little bit, but of course she also has the hat on as well. So I'm slowly building out my Obi-Wan Kenobi series of Black Series figures. This is a lot of fun. Of course, I am still waiting for Princess Leia herself. She does not exist in many forms of action figures, so I really hope that we won't have to wait too much longer to really have a full lineup of Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I really enjoyed that they just charged right in there and gave us that incredible array of the Inquisitors, because of course they're so important. I've got nearly the full lineup of Inquisitors to open, just one more to go, but I'm excited to finally start building out my Obi-Wan Kenobi series for my Black Series collection. And she's an important character and she looks really cool. Of course, maybe not the most exciting. We've seen a lot of Imperial characters before, but I think she's done really well. And I think it was such a shame that this particular Obi-Wan Kenobi series line was interrupted by that unfortunate plastic-free packaging experiment, which didn't really work. So if you are a mint and box collector, this is a figure that's probably going to be an annoyance for you because you just can't see her through the window. So I'm really glad that I finally got her out because she looks so much better, doesn't she? She looks great. Good sculpting, good paintwork. She stands well. The articulation is all there and she comes with an accessory that fits well in her hands. That's all I can ask for Black Series. I think this one does the job really well and she looks cool with the other figures. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Black Series figure and had a lot of fun checking out all of the details finally. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I've also opened up the Purge Trooper Phase 2 armor figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.